You can build the network around you that allows you to celebrate those moments of joy and get the support you need in times of challenge and overwhelm. I went through a shed load of business coaches before I found my current one. It was all lessons for the future. You need people different from you to challenge your perspective and action so you can keep trying new things and create new ways of working. The primary human source of our development is colleagues at work, and a lot of the time our senior managers. But what about outside the office doors? I realised that I'd stopped learning from others for my personal growth, and I'd convinced myself that unless it was a task I had to learn how to do, I didn't need to know. And you are part of other people's networks. So if you want your own network, all it takes is making the choice to create it. Hey, welcome to the Leaders Podcast with me, Laura McDonald, the leadership coach and mentor. Come with me as I explore the elements of leadership that give leaders like you the power and confidence to make the impact you know you can. I'll be sharing my own experiences, top tips and insights, and talking to some very special guests to share their thoughts and leadership experiences on mindset, influence, change, and growth. So let's get right to it. Building a solid and useful network can open doors that you never knew were present. When you continuously and strategically grow your network to find people who are the right fit for you and vice versa, your professional development, personal growth and well-being, and career journey, whatever direction you're taking, become much easier to manage. Strong networks provide opportunities you can take advantage of, more connections with a diverse range of people, and a constant chance to help and be helped. And while everyone can get something out of every interaction, some people in your network should just be there for you. Some days in leadership can be really tough and frustrating, and others are filled with absolute joy and laughter and success. But no matter how your days turned out, I can guarantee you one thing, that leadership can actually be really lonely. But I can also promise you there is something you can do about that. You can build the network around you that allows you to celebrate those moments of joy and get the support you need in times of challenge and overwhelm. I've personally invested a lot of my time and energy into building a network of people around me to do exactly that, including an empowering and supportive business coach whose compassion and championing of me and my purpose led to this podcast reaching 16th in the UK management charts in week 1, among so many other things. I've got an enthusiastic and engaging mentor whose love of laughter makes me leave every single session feeling more optimistic every time and ready to try new things. And I have a wonderful group of business owners, including my accountability buddy, whose insight, friendship, and personal success in her own business and life inspire me every single day. And I've built that network because I love to learn. I never want to stop that. And these are the people I know I can learn from. And believe me, it took time to find them. I went through a shed load of business coaches before I found my current one, and it was worth kissing all the frogs, because I learned what kind of experience I didn't want as well as what I did want. It was all lessons for the future. So I want to spend today's episode journeying back to the very beginning of my experience with networking and sharing my lessons learned and the pointers for anyone out there looking to build the network that serves you best. I recently attended an Institute of Leadership event with Emma Maslin, and off the back of that I read her book, The Personal Board of You, Inc., which is brilliant. Highly recommend it. If you get a chance to read it, please do. But in that, she suggested that there is a danger of thinking that mid-career you don't require any further input because you already know yourself and where you're heading. And I couldn't agree with that statement more. Many of us, even temporarily, fall into a dip of thinking we don't need anyone else. We've got this, we can do it on our own, and sometimes we even think we know it all, and there's nothing else that anyone could teach us about how to do this. We've all been there, right? Our network shrinks as we abandon our use of it, or it just simply becomes outdated because our needs move on and change. And it makes it harder to build it back up again. But most of us do build it back up again, and even those that don't will always have the chance to try. My dip was probably around 2010, 2011 when I reached the top grade for my role. I was supporting other business leaders as well as training and developing my own team and achieving business goals and objectives left, right and centre, and I was the go-to person for almost anything to do with my role. At that point in time, I knew where I was heading. I was in the pipeline to get there with my superiors, and genuinely, I thought my success would just keep growing because I was good at what I did and I knew it. And I wasn't cocky about it, but I did let myself get into the headspace that there was only so much I could learn from other people that wasn't task based. And the myth that because I was a leader, I had to be the one that knew it all still lingered there in the background. And I have no doubt that that contributed to my abandonment of personal learning for a little while. So when I faced failure in achieving a personal goal for the first time, it actually hit really hard. A couple of years after this kind of dip, I had managed to shift my headspace to a better place, but I still thought reaching my personal goals would be relatively easy. I applied for a promotion that I'd been waiting for ages. The perfect job finally came up. It was exactly what I'd been aiming for. I applied for it, but you know what? I didn't get it. And it was completely heartbreaking. But when I got past the emotion and did some reflection, I realised that while I still listened to and used other people's ideas to grow teams and businesses, I'd stopped learning from others for my personal growth, and I'd convinced myself that unless it was a task I had to learn how to do, I didn't need to know, which actually really went against who I was, and I wasn't being authentic with myself. There was other stuff going on at the time that did divert my attention away from being able to rectify that for a little while. But when I moved on and went to another sector, I got the chance to start all over again, and that was an amazing experience. I worked with the most fantastic team who had a wealth of experience to share. I found new people to learn from, and I did learn an awful lot from them. And I started to expand my language around my wants, needs, values, goals, and so many other things. And I found new directions to head in terms of my career. And I found a new personal board, and that board has adapted and changed as I've gone into the incredible journey of business ownership. And I'm so grateful for all the people that have taken a seat at that board over the years, because in one way or another, they've all helped shape the person I am now. So if you find yourself not learning from others as much or shying away from learning, work through the reasons why that's not happening quickly and recognize that you don't need a huge, robust action plan to fix it. You just need to go out there and start learning again. One simple action of learning is all it takes to start you on the path. There is one other challenge I think even more people get trapped in, which is only, in my experience, really relieved when you are really put in a position of having to do it all on your own. We spend most of our lives with friends, family, and our team. So when it comes to growth in our leadership, the primary human source of our development is colleagues at work, and a lot of the time, our senior managers. But what about outside the office doors? I will be totally and completely honest here. I never thought to look. I remember someone introducing me to TED Talks in the midst of my dip in learning from others. It was about 2010. The person was a lifelong music lover. She'd been a music teacher for some years. So this was a topic of the first talk that she showed me. And at the time, I thought this couldn't teach me anything to do with my job. It was a really good talk, really engaging, and I've watched it back a couple of times since then. It's brilliant. And I wanted to see more. And of course, TED is a world of learning in itself, but I didn't know that yet. But looking back on that experience, it was actually teaching me an awful lot. See, although that person was a new colleague who'd be doing the same job as the rest of my team, she was coming from a whole other world. The TED talk she showed me was led by a man with such passion and enthusiasm it was infectious. And I learned a little bit more about how to inspire and influence others into hearing your message, even if at the beginning of that conversation nobody believed you, which was a brilliant example set in that TED talk. And that day happened to be this person's first day of work. It was the first day I'd met her. So we'd got on pretty well throughout the day, and I just asked if she wanted to stay for a drink after work just to see if we, had anything else in common. She was relatively new to London, so I wanted to help her make some friends. And 5 hours later, we were still there, talking and learning from each other and finding more common ground than I can list right now. 15 years later, she's one of the closest friends I have and is the primary example to me that opportunities are constantly all around us. We just have to see them and be willing to take the chance. For the last 13 years of our friendship, we've not been working together, and she's been outside of my industry and job role altogether. But aside from being a valued friend, she's still played a part on my personal board every now and again, the most recent example being a couple of months ago. And I've done the same for her from time to time. This was one of the rare opportunities that I took that expanded my network outside of the office doors, because most of the other friends I had were in my organisation and in similar job roles, and they stayed there for the entire time I was in. Now, yes, that opportunity with this particular person took a short journey through my job, but most of it, most of our friendship, most of our connection, and most of her participation on my personal board was built off outside experiences, something I didn't have happen to me that often. And as I said, I was living in London at the time, so my housemates were another opportunity. They all had very different careers to me, but once I left London, I was living on my own again, and it was straight back to the confines of the company I worked for. For so long, I was confined to a network within the walls of that company. I didn't know there was a whole world of people out there just waiting for me to reach out, and that's a common train of thought, especially when you work for large organisations that are networks in themselves. So, experience taught me that there was a wide range of personalities, perspectives, and skills within my company, and that all the information I needed was in there. There was no need to go outside of it. We were also talking about the early days of social media. It had only been around for a few years. So, doing things like building a personal brand on LinkedIn was unheard of, right? So, unless I was in a business to business customer service role or a role that required me to attend industry events, my network was always going to remain within the confines of my employer. Now, I will add to that, and I will stand up for the network I did have because it was amazing. Leaders from all over the country were happy to share knowledge and skills. They would invite other leaders to come and learn from their teams or spend the day with them or whatever it was that you needed. And plenty of people at every meeting were constantly comparing ways of working and trying to find things to do better for each other. I did have a really good network, but there were quite a few limitations. For example, I was only seeing what my company was doing. New ideas weren't being brought in from the outside, which could have massively benefited everyone on the inside. Another thing was that when I no longer worked with those companies, a lot of that network disappeared or was no longer useful as they too were only seeing the inside. There was also a ceiling on the support I could have in developing my own leadership. So, particularly where there's a clear overarching leadership style present in the whole organisation, which wasn't my natural style but a learned one, finding mentors, coaches, and anybody else I might need to support my own development did become a challenge eventually. Because everybody had this overarching style, whether it was natural for them or not. So trying to expand your leadership skills, trying to explore other styles became really, really challenging. But the other side to development was that I actually needed experts in their own fields, not just mine. So if I wanted to grow my self-awareness, I needed an expert in emotional intelligence. If I wanted to understand more about motivation, I needed an expert motivator. If I wanted to build my negotiation skills, I needed an expert negotiator. Now, don't get me wrong, there were certainly people who were good at these things in my organisation, like really, really good. But if I wanted to really branch out, the people I really needed were likely sitting outside of that box and were quite possibly nowhere near my industry at all. So expanding my network beyond the walls of my company would have brought so much benefit to me back then, and therefore to my teams. But when I became a business owner in 2020, I had no choice but to do that if I wanted to keep growing. There was so much I did not know about this world. Trust me, if you're thinking of going into business and you think you know how to do it, you're still going to learn a lot every single day. But I needed to learn about social media, more about marketing and sales on these platforms. There was a lot of tech I needed to get to grips with, a lot of terms I needed to learn, a lot of systems I needed to learn to work, and I needed to spend a lot of time crafting my message and putting structures and routines into place to develop my skills as a coach because the organisation did that for me before. I had to do it for me now. And I had to learn how to manage my own accounts in a whole new way and file a self-assessment, which can be a mammoth task when you first do it. So finding the experts in these fields was necessary if I was going to succeed. This podcast and every other great adventure I've undertaken have brought more needs to the service, and my network keeps growing and changing to suit what I need. So it's never ending. So if you find that the people supporting you are all in the same building, do yourself a favour. Glance out the window, look at the places around you, then walk out the front door and go find the people that are going to help you walk back into that building a better version of you. It is a very different world to the one I started my leadership journey in. Social media platforms are everywhere. Companies that focus purely on sharing great ideas are now accessible to everyone. And leadership, in my opinion at least, is much better understood than it ever has been. Theories and models have been around forever. People have been writing them for hundreds of years, literally. But bringing real leadership into everyday life, organisations and teams is still a new concept that's developing every single day. People are constantly bringing new ideas and perspectives to the table, and over the years, I've personally evolved my own views on leadership as well as listened to many others. The one lesson I never really had much trouble learning, thank goodness, is that it takes a village. No two leaders are ever really the same, and you need a diverse mix of approaches and styles to make a team really flourish. Your network is the same principle. You need people different from you to challenge your perspective and actions so you can keep trying new things and create new ways of working. And there's so much support out there that if you're not hearing it, you need to find out why. Zoe Thompson shared an insight in her episode on this podcast that she heard that your boardroom should be challenging. So if they're all agreeing with you, you've recruited the wrong team because you've recruited people who think like you. And if they don't think like you, but they're not challenging you, then your leadership style would suggest that they don't feel comfortable, confident, or safe enough to challenge. I thought that was a fantastic insight to apply to your network too. If all you hear is affirmation, your network is not diverse enough. If all you hear is silence, then self reflection is needed to understand why you're not hearing the honest and constructive feedback you need. So assess your current network. Look at everybody in your network. Find out where they are, what they do, how they support you to grow. And then establish what gaps you see and what goals you've set for yourself, and seek out people who fill those gaps with a different perspective. If you're of a professional body, of a local organisation, utilise the networks in there too. You can always use platforms like Eventbrite to find networking events where you can meet new people. There's plenty of options out there, and obviously social media is a great place to connect. Platforms like LinkedIn have been amazing since I started my business, and I've met so many interesting people who've put out so many great ideas, and even if I don't agree, I'm willing to listen. Diversity is key to a good network, so utilize the access you have to the rest of the world. Find the places where the people you need are likely to be, and make sure you've got the best and most tailored support you can get, rather than simply what's available. So there's a few things I've shared about myself on this podcast that you probably already know that relate to networking, but just in case you haven't, here's a recap. I like small groups. I like real, meaningful, and deep connections. So my network is wide, but the group that supports me is small and personalised, and I learn a huge amount from each one of them. But I do know others who prefer to have lots of people and learn a little bit from each, and some who prefer to just keep trying new things, meeting new people all the time and moving on again. There's no real kind of stability to their board, they just keep moving forward. I also know I'm not the biggest fan of online networking. It's too fast, it's too organised because it has to be. You've only got an hour and it's on a Zoom call. If you want people to have one-to-one conversations, the only way to do it is in a breakout room. But if you have to schedule 10 minutes in a breakout room, you're not going to find out much about that person in 10 minutes. I don't really have the time to get to know anyone in that space. So if I'm going to do networking, in person is my deal. But again, I know a lot of people who love online networking and can easily make great connections through those types of events and channels. So however you prefer your relationships with others to form, do network in your way. It's going to feel much more personalized. It's going to feel like it's a comfortable experience. It's going to allow you to talk to people about what you want to talk about and really hear them when they talk too. Explore different ways of doing it, and there's plenty of places you can find people. But however you do networking, strategically build that smaller group of people around you who will help you thrive. And if it takes time, it takes time. But whoever you have on your board, review it regularly because you might not need someone right now. So you can reduce communication and updates with them until you need them again. You might need a new person bringing in to support a new need, or you might just need a little bit more diversity in your space. Here's the thing about networks. They are all around you, and you are part of other people's networks right now. Somehow or another, you are supporting other people to develop and grow. So if you want your own network, all it takes is making the choice to create it. Until next time, everyone.